Mine has been a life of much shame. I can't even guess myself what it must be to live the life of a human being. I'm ahead of the curve, also known as James Bergman, and in this video today it will be a review but also a book haul. Just me showing you some books that I got today. I've got a number of them, so I just thought, well, why don't I just do a review and have a bonus bit at the end. So yeah, I will be discussing No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. Portraying himself as a failure, the protagonist of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human narrates a seemingly normal life even while he feels himself incapable of understanding human beings. Obayazu's attempts to reconcile himself to the world around him begins in early childhood, continues throughout his life, in high school where he becomes a clown to mask his alienation, and eventually led to a failure suicide attempt as an adult. Without sentimentality, he records the casual cruelties of life and its fleeting moments of human connection and tenderness. This will be a bit more of a laid-back review, and I only say that because I now realise that I didn't add the publication date in the intro. So, yeah, it says here that it was first published in 1958, and it is a Japanese novel. It's actually one of the most famous books in Japan in terms of sort of an existential theme to it. And I read this in one day, i.e. today. I went out for a book hunt. In the UK we have charity shops and books are very, very cheap. So I went on a book hunt and I got 6 new books, which, as I said in the intro, I will, or at the beginning of the video, I will discuss, so why not? And so I sat down in a cafe and I read this, No Longer Human, in one sitting. It took me about 2.5 hours to read, maybe. Bit more, bit less, I don't know. And I can tell you this, the whole experience is quite numbing, actually. You know, after I finished, I was, I don't know, I was looking out the cafe window, just dazed, numbed, maybe slightly uncomfortable, because this book, it left me with a certain feeling, which was numbness. Usually when I read a book, I mean, I don't necessarily review it the day that I finish it, but I feel like with this one, it's not the kind of book that I feel like I want to do like other book reviews. I feel like when a book kind of touches me in a way, like a part of me a part of me wants to just talk about it, wants to just discuss it, and instead of waiting, I want to kind of freestyle my thoughts in this video. So from the get-go, this guy, his attempts at fitting in don't go too well, because even from an early age, he doesn't necessarily get hungry. He doesn't conform in the same way that everybody else seems to be doing. And that's an interesting thing, because how many of us find ourselves not conforming, but actually we start conforming not because it's necessarily natural to do so for us, but because we are pressured into doing so. He talks about eating 3 times a day and how that's sort of set in stone. It's just something that we do. And it's these kind of questions that really cement the theme of this book, which is some kind of social dissidence. This character is an outcast. The thing is, I feel like everybody is an outcast in some sense, you know, because I think that genuinely speaking, people do have these thoughts. It's just a matter of voicing those thoughts, and if they do, they are met with the same prosecutions and misunderstandings as Obayazu's, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrongly, wrongly works, yeah. And so in that sense, it felt very relatable, because even in my case, from a young age, I didn't really, I mean, sports wasn't my thing, for example, and pretty much most other people liked sports in the UK as well. We're all football oriented, and I never really cared about it, to be honest. I did my own thing, and it felt the same in some sense, you know, not to the level necessarily that the character felt, but that sort of feeling that everybody else is doing something that, I mean, of course, people can like what they like, right? But I suppose the question is why people are doing something, and whether it truly entertains them or if they're just following this social code. And so the book felt eerie in a sense, because I found myself relating to it, but also I couldn't feel much whilst reading it, because the book isn't supposed to make you feel much. You know, like when you read a book, right, it's like, yeah, you feel like, oh yeah, the writing's great and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, well, it feels like I was just taken aback by the tone, the theme, and that was what was playing in my mind the most. If anything, it was just, I was caught in the story, and I just kept on going, like an addict with cigarettes. There's just something very eerie and very strange about this book. It's something unfathomably unprecedented. I think it's an exploration of some sense of what all of us human beings, and some more than others obviously, but we all at times feel this certain way, this alienation from what we are told to do or what we are thinking, and we consider whether that is worth doing or whether it's relevant or whatever. And of course, it's much easier to just be to just follow it along. And look, fair enough. Like, it's difficult to question things and to be dissident and to have the courage to question people in general. And obviously, many people in the past have done that, and politically speaking, it hasn't ended up very well for them. So, as you might be able to tell, this book, I don't really know, at one level, I don't know what to say about the book, but on another level, I have things to say, and it's really strange because it leaves me in this numbness. It's just this numbness, and I feel like I need to reread this book, and it's actually quite short as well. It's like 180 pages, but the text on my copy is fairly small, but it's the margins are gapped quite a lot. I love this edition as well. I want to point this out. The edition is phenomenally beautiful. I love this a lot. And I haven't really read much, if not any, Japanese literature. I've got Kusamakura by Nutsum Sozeki. I obviously butchered that. But I've got that to read, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I don't know if I have read any Japanese literature. Maybe I have like once, but it's not really, you know, it's not that I'm against it or anything, it's just I haven't got to it. And yeah, I mean, it's just, the thing is throughout the book as well, and the most profound thing is that he's living with this idea that compassion in some sense is worth banning, and it's worth not paying attention to, and to some degree it's like love attaches itself to him, but at the same time of it letting him go, he also lets it go. And I think that's due to his volatile personality, which is to reject constellations when he comes across them, because obviously somebody who's experienced what he has to such the degree that he has, pleasurable experiences without a cost are very hard to come by, and especially with interacting with other human beings, which he did. Well, obviously we were all forced to do that, but his own interaction with himself is what I find interesting, which is to effectively just drink. The thing is with that, though, is that at least it's the most consistent. Well, it's more consistent than, let's say, trying to trust somebody else, because as far as he's concerned, and many people are concerned, it's very difficult to trust somebody else. And the cost of friendship can be quite fatal, and it can hurt. And of course, that's the cost, but also the reason why the pleasure of it is so grand. He's just constantly questioning himself in comparison to other people, and rightly so, because he's like, well, you know, things aren't really that great, are they? But people, I think the difference between him and somebody else, you know, is that that's kind of the deal from the get-go. You know, life is a sexually transmitted disease with a 100% fatality rate. And I suppose there comes a point where you learn that, and then you don't become surprised at anything at all. That isn't to say that it doesn't hurt, but it is to say that there is some numbing when bad things happen, because you're like, well, I'm not surprised. And I think the character is much like that, well, to a point. Towards the end, his rejections of consolation and relationships, you know, abusing relationships because, or other, you know, other women's love, for example, throughout the piece, because it is evidently much harder to trust somebody and to surrender your own comfortability, safety, than it is to service somebody else with it. Because obviously, as I said before, there's a great cost to trust. He rejects it in all directions, and obviously that's understandable. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a pit that you just keep on, you know, you have a shovel and you got the pit, and it's digging your own grave in a sense, but the grave is always going to be there. It doesn't matter how deeply you dig into it, it's still going to be there. So at least he's being, I don't know, maybe much more honest and upfront about the facts of life than we try to be, generally speaking, as humans, because we have very, very many distractions and you know, the routines and organization, you know, eating a certain amount a day, 3 meals a day, let's say, wearing certain clothes, conforming to societal norms, and acting as a society, which, as he points out, at times can be merely an individual. But the thing is with it being an individual, the thing is with society being an individual, is that it depends on individuals talking to each other to a certain capacity, and communication isn't really one of the greatest attributes or virtues of humanity. Hence we go into many wars. It's clearly not something that is easy to do, nor even preferable to do, and it's interesting because the easier thing to do is to exhibit aggression instead of understanding, because the latter throws your barriers down and the former throws them up and attacks. And attacking is much more comfortable than being in laughter, you know, because when you laugh, your barriers are down and you're open to attack. And so if we're taking that metaphor to the fullest extent, it is understandable. I've literally just got back from reading this piece, and I'm gonna watch some videos on the book, and I'm gonna look more into it. Yeah. So those are my sort of initial thoughts, and again, this might not be the most in-depth video, although I would have hoped to give some depth to some extent. I wanted to style the video in this way because I feel like I just needed to talk about it effectively, immediately, because otherwise, you guys know what I mean. When you read a certain book like this, No Longer Human, you, especially when it's existential or, you know, difficult in some sense to read, you kind of need an outlet. You need to talk about it, you need to get your thoughts down somewhere else in your head, because it can get quite messy. But yeah, that's the end of my review of No Longer Human. I overall enjoyed it, but I still feel like I'm still processing it unconsciously or subconsciously, both probably, and a bit of consciously at the moment. Yeah, I think it's a book that needs to be reread, and I can tell that it's going to definitely stay in my head. That's for sure. A very ponderous piece. But yeah, that's all I want to say about No Longer Human. I'm going to talk about the books that I picked up today, because why not? You guys might find it interesting. So no particular order. I don't know how you pronounce this, but Sophocles. The Three Theban Plays. Antigone, Oedipus the King, Oedipus at Colmus. Penguin edition. And yeah, this looks interesting. Obviously, Oedipus caught my eye immediately, knowing the podcast. But yeah, Oedipus in exile, searching for his identity and achieving immortality, defending her integrity, his daughter's integrity and ideals. Tragic figures have captivated theatregoers and readers since the 5th century BC. So yeah, this sounds interesting. I want to read more sort of Greek stuff. On to the next book that I picked up, Christopher Hitchens' The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and in Practice. So yeah, I was really surprised to pick this one up, because you might get what I mean, right? If you go to thrift shops in the US, or whatever they're called outside of the US, but in the UK it's called like charity shops, and it's the same kind of thing as thrift shops. But whenever I go there and I pick up these kind of books, I'm like, somebody has read these, and my faith in humanity is kind of restored, so that's a positive thing at least. But anyway, I found this, a very short piece, but yeah, I managed to pick it up in a hardback, and this is basically Christopher Hitchens' case against Mother Teresa. And if you guys don't know, he attacked Mother Teresa, the saint of Catholicism. And yeah, I mean, I've read up about this in general, but Mother Teresa basically is not necessarily as positive or as constructive upon humanity as we once believed. Just to briefly admit, the practices that she did were blatantly unethical. The homes that she held people in were not well kept. She didn't believe in contraception. She thought it effectively, AIDS was worse than contraception. Well, Catholicism does that in general, but she also was trying to ban it as well. And so yeah, her practices, her ideals weren't necessarily the best for her cause, ironically speaking. And so yeah, Hitchens wrote this very small piece about her. He also landed in a bit of trouble as well. There's an interesting interview on YouTube with him debating some Catholics. So yeah, that's quite funny. The next one, Rini Edo Lodge, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Now, I've heard of this one before. I've got another book which is So You Want to Talk About Race, and that was interesting, but this I suppose will be fairly similar. But I'm interested in the whole race question, and I want to hear people's perspectives. Yeah, it's just good to be learned on this sort of stuff, just so I'm not committing any tragic ideologies in my own thinking, or if I'm trying to be as well understood on these political subjects as I can. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this. It should be interesting. Next one, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, I think. Yeah, I've heard about this one. I don't really know anything about it, honestly, but this is like the perfect edition. It suits my other ones, so I'm looking forward to this. It's quite a popular one, so yeah, deal. Next one, Alexander Chauvinism, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovitz. This is a very short piece as well. This has been on my radar since I've read The Gulag Archipelago by Chauvinism. And yeah, I think this is a fiction, but it's, if you don't know, Chauvinism was a commentator and sort of a voice of the Soviet Union and I believe a survivor of the gulags, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. It's been a while since I researched that kind of stuff. Soviet Union, but yeah, the Gulag Archipelago was pretty dense. I reviewed it, by the way, if you want to check that out. But yeah, this one sounds interesting, and it's got good reviews, and it's very short, so win-win. So yeah, look forward to checking that one out too. And the last one, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, Milan Kundera, I think you pronounce his name is Milan Kundera, yeah, something like that. Yeah, no, I've heard about this book from a few people, GC McKay in particular. I think he loves this book. I know a lot of other people do as well. So yeah, this is a cool front cover. I quite like that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to reading all of these books, and I've read a good book today, and my faith in humanity has been slightly restored on the other spectrum after reading No Longer Human, because I remember that, people are actually reading the kind of books that I like, and not just you guys, wherever you might be. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading all these books. Comment below what you think of my thoughts on No Longer Human. Yeah, so thank you for watching, guys. Take it easy. I've been ahead of the curve, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.